Okay. So we're going to continue now. So everybody, please join us and come back into the room. Please find your seats and
don't necessarily mind.
I think as we're a bit tight on the schedule, we can close the doors now. So we're now starting with the final panel of the day, which will be on rule of law and fighting corruption. And I give the word to Dr. Andi Hoxha for the moderation.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for staying so late, and we really appreciate it. And we're going to start the conversation on rule of law and fighting corruption. It's not the most easiest of topic, but I'm delighted to be here in the stage with a number of colleagues who, by the way, all of them have a law degree. So if some of you do get bored, if we go into the legal details, do give us a note. I would like to start introducing the panel and a little bit the aims around the conversation that we would like to have. So we have Mr. Vigan Joroli, who is the Deputy Justice Minister. He has a wide-range career in academia, also working and engaging with civil society, and very much involved in the rule of law efforts in Kosovo. Then we are joined by Desiliava Gostava, who is the head secretary of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative, and she has a wide-range career as well as expertise working with the Bulgarian Anti-Corruption Commission and a number of NGOs, Europol, on asset recovery, good governance, and anti-corruption. We have Renard Priebe, who has worked in a number of courts here in Germany, mostly in administrative and constitutional court, but was also a director of the European Commission enlargement portfolio, and he's currently working as honorary professor at the FON University in Skopje. And we also have Neyman Nentaji, do apologize for my pronunciation and do correct me, who is a practicing lawyer at the 3rd municipality in Belgrade, but also works with Transparency International as their program director and has been involved in a number of initiatives regarding rule of law and anti-corruption in Serbia. So part of our conversation today is about the rule of law and anti-corruption in the Western Balkans. And we have some of the guiding questions that I would like to kick off our conversation today. And those are, what can the EU do to promote the rule of law and fight against corruption, and how that can remain a central theme of the enlargement process? We want to focus particularly what can the Berlin process do about the rule of law and fighting corruption, and should it be reintroduced, because initially it was part and then it was kicked out, and there is a conversation now. And more broadly, what can the Western Balkan and civil society do to address and monitor some of the rule of law efforts and fight against corruption? So I would like to kick off sort of 5 minutes for each of the panelists on their reflection in these sort of question. So if we could start with the Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Professor Hoxha. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panelists, dear all, I welcome you all present here. Thank you for having me here in Berlin to talk on behalf of the Ministry of Justice of the Republic of Kosovo on this very much critical global issue. First of all, the fight against corruption and organized crime requires a comprehensive and multifaceted approach. So with regard to the worst type of corruption, we know that in Balkan, the most present one is a political corruption. In legal terms, malpolitics or political corruption uses powers by government officials or their network contacts for illegitimate private gain. This type is most concerning, one as it is erode the fundamental value of the law that governs and regulates society, creating a massive mess in the country as a whole. As the government, as the Ministry of Justice specifically, we have been recently instrumental in creating the legal infrastructure in Kosovo that what is called the tangible progress in this direction, despite the ongoing challenges encountered along our journey, which is normal, I believe. The fundamental issues of the judiciary and justice, as well as the advancement of fundamental rights, have been and continue to be the foremost priority for our government, which in the recent political history of the country will be soon the first government to fulfill the 4-year constitutional mandate. Our reform initiatives have begun to strengthen the rule of law, improve effectiveness in combating corruption and organized crime, and initiate criminal, civil, and administrative reforms, thereby resulting in concrete progress in addressing human rights, among other areas. When it comes to the Berlin process, I would like to say that we are the very first government in the entire Balkans that we have approved the growth plan. And that has been, by coincidence, yesterday approved in our government, which includes 30 reforms. And among these 30 reforms, we have 111 components. Out of them, the most significant one, I believe, they belong to the justice sector. The amount that Kosovo is having the very progressive approach. It means that as well, I have to admit, although this is a rather not a modesty, that Kosovo is again first country in the Western Balkan that was praised by European Commission to have 80 some sort of 1 billion, almost of them 1 billion euro from the package that will be funded in addition to other. In 2021, the government of the Republic of Kosovo approved the rule of law strategy 2021-26, and within the first 3 years, we have accomplished an 85% of implementation of the strategy's activities, with ongoing progress in those currently underway. This strategy outlines a range of measures and activities for the participating institutions in the forthcoming period within the vision to restore citizens' trust in the system and attain the highest standards in justice. The judicial and prosecutorial system must be stripped of any kind of political influence. And we are trying to figure this out because, you know, we had in the sense that we started a macro or mega process like previously Albania did, but slightly different or rather very different from Albania, the vetting process. But we have to remain a judicial and prosecutorial system stripped of any kind of political influence. We are obliged to create an environment where the judicial and prosecutorial system is stripped of any kind of political influence and acts only on the basis of the personal conscience and professional preparation of the judge and prosecutor on the basis of the public is judged. Lastly, what is important, and I'm going then to discuss probably after the end of our initial talk, we, as a Ministry of Justice or as a government, we have signed with two independent institutions, which are Kosovo Judicial Council and Kosovo Prosecutorial Council, the joint statement of commitment, which is part of the growth plan as well. So initiating this joint statement of commitment is obliged or it derives from the necessary legal change aimed at strengthening existing performance, integrity, and disciplinary mechanism for judges and prosecutors. In addition to the fight against corruption and organized crime, we have finalized and approved an anti-corruption legal package, including the law on the State Bureau for Verification and Confiscation of Unjustified Assets and the regulation on whistleblowing. Moreover, we are progressing towards establishing the anti-corruption task force and the joint investigation team in order to tackle criminal offenses related to organized crime. So the lot has been done, and of course the new reform that has started with our government will continue in next phase and in next year in order to be instrumental for the rule of law and strengthening and believing that the justice sector should be more instrumental to highlight, I mean, the reform initiative in the both Judicial and Prosecutorial Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We go over to the Director of RAI for your reflections.
Thank you. Thank you. First, let me thank the organizers for the invitation to participate in this panel and to share RAI perspective on this very important topic on the rule of law and fighting corruption, alongside with the distinguished panelists. And I would like also to thank you all for the interest and being in the room in the end of this very long day. To provide a little bit of a context for my participation in the panel today, I would like very briefly to introduce the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative for those of you who are unfamiliar with our work. The Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative, or RAI, has been established back in 2000, so under the Stability Pact, so almost 25 years ago, and with the aim to address corruption and to contribute to the development of the region after the war conflict in former Yugoslavia. So 25 years ago, the countries recognized the importance of fighting corruption. And here we are, 25 years later, still discussing this issue. We have to say that throughout the years, the organization gained a lot of experience, knowledge, and therefore I think that we could really contribute to the discussions and the topic under the Berlin process as well. I'm also very happy that the organizers are bringing this topic in a focus because it's extremely important, and as it has been acknowledged by the speakers yesterday and today, most of there cannot be corruption really is a real threat to state institutions and democracy, but also it imposes a threat to economic growth environment. Just recently, in last week in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there has been a disaster, and there are some allegations that it was possible because of corruption there. So I think that it's extremely important to keep this topic on focus. Why and how we could contribute to the discussion. 25 years ago, when the organization was established by the 9 governments from Southeastern Europe, none of them was part of the EU. Currently, 3 of the member countries of the organization, Bulgaria, Croatia, and Romania, are EU members, and 3 countries which are observers to RAI are also EU members, and these are Slovenia, Poland, and Greece. There is increased interest in what we are doing because the countries and the governments from the region, but also the anti-corruption agencies, find this opportunity to meet, discuss, and work on common problems as very important and essential. It's also important that we bring the neighboring countries around the table for discussion, and I'm very happy to share that we also do cooperate very well with the EU. For example, last week we were participating in the EU Network Against Corruption plenary meeting, and we are currently finalizing RAI membership to the network, which would allow the region to be represented at the network, informal network, where practitioners from the EU countries gather to discuss practical and concrete issues. I know that most of you would agree that the region in these 25 years has achieved a lot, and probably not as much as we would like to see, but especially in terms of legislation, policy commitments, there have been a number of. In RAI, what we are trying is to address the current challenges, and by recognizing the fact that translating policy commitments into practical policies and implementing these policies in practice is often a challenge in the region. So what we try to do is develop mechanisms which could be implemented in practice by the countries and support them in their endeavor. In the morning session, in the discussion, the colleagues said that it's good to have this peer pressure for the advancement of the reforms in the Western Balkans and in the reforms that are required for the accession to the EU. We slightly have changed our approach. Well, we do not speak anymore and we do not look for peer pressure, but we much more focus on peer support. What we try to do is identify the common problems and find solutions. How and what is the role of the Berlin process? RAI has been involved together with UNODC in the implementation of the anti-corruption and illicit finance for Western Balkans roadmap, which was a 3 years program funded by the UK under the Berlin process. We have to say that the process and the program ensured the political will through adoption of the roadmap and the political commitment. There have been a lot of expectations by the governments. We continue to work on this, and we hope that we will continue to have rule of law and corruption, fighting corruption, but also corruption prevention in focus. Therefore, we strongly welcome the recommendations from the working group to reintroduce the topic under the Berlin process, and also the recommendation which suggests that there is targeted funding for programs and projects concrete on specific topics which would support countries in fighting corruption. Another topic, and I'm finishing. I know that there is a lot of interest, and especially in the EU integration and negotiation process on prosecution of corruption. Nevertheless, I think it's also very important that we work on corruption prevention. Because building integrity in the region, working with youth is, although probably not having very immediate effect, would bring the change the civil society, important player. We at RAI try to bring all the key stakeholders around the table for discussions, the governments, the civil society, the international community. Civil society, very important for providing monitoring and impact assessments. I think this is also something that is lacking in the region. We have to have an independent assessment on the policies and effectiveness of the policies implemented and legislation by the governments.
Thank you.
So I would give the floor now to Professor Brebe, who is actually the expert in reporting.
Thank you.
I'm certainly not the expert in making this work.
Underneath there is a mic here. Do you want to try? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much and good evening. And it's probably the wisdom of the organizers to put rule of law at the very end of an exhausting day as the absolutely highlight of the day. Let
We
me
like to
just
think so.
make a few remarks from my observation over quite a few years in dealing with rule of law matters in the Western Balkans. First of all, and this needs to be repeated again and again and made very clearly, rule of law is a basic value in the EU treaty and it is a condition for receiving new member states. And it is one of these conditions where no compromises should be expected. And I think that's very important. Another introductory remark I want to make is that rule of law is, of course, a very wide and unclear notion. And I think many discussions about this subject suffer a bit about the fact that it is not clear what we are talking about. For me, the core of rule of law is the fundamental rights of the citizens and the efficient functioning of an independent judiciary. But if you look at papers and follow discussions, rule of law can be much broader. It can be civil society. It certainly includes fighting against corruption. It can be even checks and balances between the state institutions. So I think it is quite important when we are talking about rule of law to be always clear what we are talking about. During the day, we several times remarks where the notion of rule of law was simply understood as respecting the law. Well, that is the very notion of rule of law, that the rule laws and nothing else, where there is a law. And so I just wanted to make aware everybody on something which is clear. It's a very broad notion, and we have to be clear what we are talking about. It has become the priority in the accession process, but discussion about functioning of rule of law have not only started in the past 5 years. In the accession process, they have been there as from the beginning. And another element which might complicate things or might simplify things, that the European Union is facing more and more also rule of law problems with some of its own member states. That should not be understood in the Western Balkans as a pretext or an excuse that the EU might become less stricter on the rule of law. It's rather the opposite. The internal discussions with some member states, and it happens that these are relatively new member states, rather lead European politicians to an attitude: we have made maybe mistakes in previous accession processes, that we had not been vigilant enough on rule of law issues, and therefore we should be very vigilant now with new candidates. So therefore I think it's very important to be aware of that. Many informations can be drawn from these discussions between the EU and its own member states, by the way, including some very detailed judgments of the European Court of Justice. And so it is a very interesting source of information. And since 2020, the European Commission is every year writing a report on the state of rule of law in its own member states. And I think it's a very good news that this year, for the first time, this report includes 4 of the Western Balkan countries. I haven't found out the explanations why it's only 4 and not 6, probably because they considered the 2 remaining as so complicated that they leave it for later on to deal with that. Now, briefly, why has the progress on rule of law matters been so slow in recent years, and why have there even been some backsliding? I think there are reasons not only in the countries but also in the European Union. And maybe I should start for once with the international community. The countries get a lot of advice and a lot of money in this area, and I wonder if they don't get too much advice and too much confusing advice. Many organizations organize, some of them with enormous skills in the area of rule of law, like OSCE or the Council of Europe. But there is an inflation of advices given to the countries in the region, and maybe some need to streamline on the essentials on what is needed for the functioning of rule of law is needed. Also, the advice even coming from EU member states, but also coming from other countries, especially also from the US, are coming from very different legal cultures. I'm certain that an American, a very skilled rule of law expert assessing the functioning of criminal courts in one of the Western Balkan countries would give totally different advice and make totally different comments than a German lawyer would do, and even the advices of a French or a German lawyer would not be the same. So there is a problem that the international advice comes from very different legal cultures, and therefore might be quite confusing. And then there's another problem. I wouldn't have said that if I still were an official of the European Commission, but since I'm away from that since 10 years now, I'm free to do that. There is, of course, a risk not to have exactly the same approach for each of the countries. And to put it a bit more bluntly, with those countries where there are still big open political issues, the European Union might be a bit more hesitant to bother this country at the same time with detailed rule of law issues. I'm not mentioning a particular country, but I have been asked so often, whenever I'm in Belgrade, I'm asked, why have you chaired a senior rule of law experts group making reports on Macedonia and Bosnia, and why don't you ever come to Belgrade? There are also some serious problems here. So there are some shortcomings on the international side. Of course, also there are shortcomings in the countries. I've probably exhausted my time, but let me just mention one which I think is the most important one, is that I think the whole issue of rule of law should be communicated within the countries and also by local politicians differently. It is not, what needs to be done is not to be done to please Brussels and to kick off an important accession condition. It needs to be done in the interest of the citizens, of the economies, and how often have I heard in recent times that people are leaving the country not primarily because of economic reasons, but of the uncertainty of lack of rule of law, and this message needs to be put much stronger. And the other issue which we have elaborated a bit in these reports is that the rules are not missing. The institutions are not missing. There are judicial councils, there are anti-corruption offices, all this is there. But there's a need to change the culture. There is not a well-developed culture of independent judiciary, and that is probably the biggest problem. And as everybody knows, changing cultures takes more time than changing a law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're going to pass it on to a practitioner who may give us some further reflection.
Thank you very much. Thank you for invitation here and for honor to speak in front of you. Thank you for your interest. Well, yeah, first about pronunciation. For those interested, it's Nemanja Nenadic, and I used to work in court 25 years ago, and ever since then I'm in civil society, first in European Movement and then in Transparency International for Serbia. And well, it's always if we speak about rule of law, it's always inspirative, let's say, to speak about these issues in Germany. And I'm raising one issue from multiple Transparency International meetings when we discussed about implementation of international standards. And then my colleagues from Germany were always complaining, oh, our parliament didn't want to adopt United Nations Convention Against Corruption. What can we do? Are we worst in the world? And I explained to them, no, the reason for that is that German parliamentarians probably read what is inside and they are not ready to adopt it, unlike parliamentarians in other countries that just raising hands if there is some international mechanism to adopt. When coming to the rule of law, I always like, Professor Priebe mentioned that rule of law is not just fulfilling what is the basic notion to respect what is written in the law. But I must say that we would be actually very happy to have at least that standard fulfilled for the beginning. And it would be really good to have also similar approach, at least by European Union and other institutions that are monitoring progress of our countries. To start with that, it is not sufficient, of course, for the rule of law, but it would be good to have it. And for example, I'm in Serbian language, I'm making some comparisons or sentences like, but it would function actually better in German than in English, that wir leben in einem Halbrechtsstaat. Yeah, so you can translate if you may be better than me, if it's possible to translate to English. So it is not rule of law if we have laws applied in one case and not in another case. It is not rule of law. So it is not even Rechtsstaat, which means literally legal state, or I don't know how to translate that better. So, and we have many examples of that kind that might be interesting for lawyers or for the rest of civil society. For example, we have the law saying that directors of state-owned enterprises may be appointed only based on public competition for the period of 4 years, based on merit, etc., etc. It is written in the law. And it is possible also to appoint acting director for a certain period of time, like 6 months or 1 year. But in reality, we have 2/3 of such enterprises, including the biggest ones, where we have acting directors whose mandate expired long time ago. And then when the disaster came and where our system of electricity producing collapsed, then President of Republic made some subtle message to this acting director that he has to resign, and he resigned. But we commented, but you cannot resign. Your mandate expired 6 years ago. That's the problem that we are facing with. Or, for example, it is particularly interesting for lawyers. We have the parliament that adopted several authentic interpretations of the law. That's the mechanism that exists in some countries, in some not. But you know what is the problem? You can interpret provision to explain what is 1 out of 2 or 3 of possible meanings. But our parliament makes such interpretations in a way that totally change what is the meaning of the provisions. So these are examples that might be quite illustrative that we have Halbrechtsstaat, or that the system does not function on this basic level. But when it comes to messages, you asked also about European Union, what European Union can do. they can do a lot of things. And one thing that they should definitely change is something that they practice. I mean, I'm speaking now about politicians, not necessarily about staff in European Commission and national delegations, but political messages following so-called progress reports or regress reports, better maybe to call them, are quite frequently, okay, yes, you have problems with the rule of law, but you have excellent economic results. No, it's totally wrong to put things in that way. You either have rule of law or not, and that's the problem. If you don't have, you cannot compensate that with however good economic results are. And honestly speaking, I have no idea why European Union politicians are doing that. Obviously, they would like to please political leaders of Balkan countries, I don't know, to keep them on EU track. But what alternative Balkan actually has? There is no, I mean, some people would say Russia or China, but those countries are very far away, and there is no feasible way to make any country of the Balkans part of Russian Federation or China Federation or whatever it is. So European Union, and I pretty much believe that everyone in our countries is aware of that, even those who are opposing EU integration. European Union do not have some realistic alternative, and politicians from EU, if we are sending messages to them, should be aware of that as well, and should not try to please Balkan leaders to keep them on European track. No, they should be much more firm when asking for the rule of law and fight against corruption. And they also have to have consistent approach. You know, if we read in country reports, including my country, messages like it is wrong to go into direct contracting with companies from third parties while not respecting basic public procurement rules adopted by European Union. And we are reading these messages, and these messages are good. But these messages are not so, let's say, uverljive, ako neko zna, convincible, if we have EU member states concluding contracts with our government and maybe with some other government in the region, I don't know, in similar manner, and looking for their profits and interests of their industries. So it is not convincible approach. And we have, it was mentioned, a colleague from Kosovo mentioned that the growth plan, and we discussed growth plan in previous sessions and some aspects of it. And so, yeah, growth plan, our government also adopted it like a week ago. And so the question is, to which extent we can consider growth plan as a mechanism that would make governments of Balkan region to respect rule of law and to make other reforms in reality. I mean, 6 billion euro is quite a lot of money, but if someone wants to steal on public procurements, on other secret contracting, so I believe that it is also possible to earn in an illicit way, of course, that money as well. So this conditionality, I doubt whether this amount of money is sufficient for Balkan leaders to keep with the rule of law track. That's one problem. But another problem is the growth plan itself and the actions that will be followed, conditions that will be followed in order to decide whether money will be given to the states or not. I'm not aware yet about the action plans of other countries, but what I see is that they are definitely not sufficient for my country. For example, I mentioned already problem with the direct contracting, with special rules of public procurement for some special projects. That's the problem that we also have. And there is such a condition in growth plan. But you know what? We have to, Serbia has to fulfill that condition to annul all laws that are violating public procurement competition rules in 2026 or 7. And guess what? We have special law for the exhibition Expo 27, which provides that public procurement law will not be applied for that multi-billion project. It doesn't seem convincible again measure if we are facing with a situation where EU will basically turn the blind eye for that practice. Or, for example, when it comes to corruption, track record has to be improved. Okay, that's fine. When it comes to verdicts and in particular when it comes to the high-level corruption. But there are no figures. So one day, maybe someone would say that if we had 21 verdicts one year and 23 verdicts next year, that we have improvement and that we fulfilled this condition when it comes to fight against corruption. I don't think it's sufficient. And what we really need to come back from European Union is clear message that that our improvement in the area of fight against corruption should not be measured by counting of verdicts. Yes, I will. Of verdicts where corruption was identified and where those perpetrators are sentenced, but by counting whether there is any case where we all know from the documents and information published by media, published by civil society, that there was corruption or that might be corruption, but the cases were not investigated by public prosecutor, not to speak about sentence. Sorry for speaking too long.
Thank you. So I'm going to invite the audience in a minute to prepare your thoughts and come up. But in the meantime, I kind of want to reflect on some of the points that you make, and I'm trying to sort of summarize it in a bit. But what kind of sort of struck me, we all can agree that there is a legal infrastructure in place. Some countries are catching up in the legal infrastructure, but we are talking here about implementing it and changing the culture around both the rule of law and fight against corruption. But my sort of reflection in here is, well, how do we create the condition on the ground, one for civil society to be supported in this endeavor, to spotlight rule of law backsliding or regress, as well as the fight against corruption. So we did mention whistleblowers, and this kind of links a little bit to some of the points that you are making. Only 22% of corruption cases are well known across the world, and that is because people fear to come out in the Western Balkans, but more broadly, even here in Germany where we are, there is a stigma around the whistleblower. So, for instance, East Germany, when you compare it with West Germany, they do not come forward to use the whistleblower law. In the Western Balkans, it's the same thing, so which kind of adds to your point when you propose legislation and policies in the Western Balkans, it's important to bring in the local context. But what I want you to sort of bear that in mind to how do we create the conditions. Can I invite Georgi here and the gentleman over there, and I think I saw a hand somewhere here. If you could come ask your question or reflection, and then we collect 3 points, and then we give the audience and speakers a chance.
Hello, everyone. I was looking forward to this spotlight panel, actually. Nemanja, you said a lot of things. You spoke the minds of, I'm sure, most of the room here. The problem is that this is a spotlight session. This is not a working group. And I'm afraid that all the stuff that we said here and the recommendations that we said here, it's important for this to reach the table, the leaders' table on Monday. And I know all the working groups will be there, the moderators of the working groups. I'm not sure whether this spotlight session and the other spotlight sessions their messages will be transmitted there. So this is one of the strong points I think that were made today, and which is very important. The other strong point that was made throughout the event from yesterday until today is the call for returning rule of law topic, democracy topic, as part of the Berlin process. Remind yourself in 2014, where was that topic? It was an important topic for the region. It was an important topic also for the partners, the countries of the Western Balkans. It's important to bring it back. A lot of things have happened, but unfortunately, when it comes to corruption and rule of law, in the past 10 years, I can say that a lot of bad things have happened. We discussed about rule of law. Many of the speakers pointed out to some of the problems, but sometimes it's bizarre to talk about rule of law when you know that the laws are actually tailored to please some interests, which are not legitimate interests and are not even legal interests to be preserved. So they go against the public interest. They go against the public good. They go against the people's objective for democratization, consolidation, economic development, European integration, if that ever happens. So I think it's important to discuss this in the right settings. Corruption is a big problem in the region, that's true. But so is state capture. And I'm sorry, we have half of the region that show not only clear signs, but clear tendencies, consolidated practices of capture, complete capture. Laws that are adopted to serve some individuals' interests, procedures that are scrapped completely, and even protection being given, as Nemanja said, by law, even by constitution, if you want. And even more bizarre situations, and I'll leave it there. Albania, as you know, conducted this, is implementing still the judicial reform. And we have this special prosecutor, SPAC, which is doing history in the past couple of years. And the bizarre situation is European Commission, in its report, congratulating Edi Rama for the great job on the judicial reform, because SPAC has arrested the hand-picked ministers of Edi Rama. I mean, I'm sorry. We are all here. We have eyes. We read. We've been here for the past 3 decades. Let's not pretend to. I mean, if we all want to do things properly, let's. But we cannot do things by avoiding topics, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jovan Rajic, I'm a lawyer coming from Renewables and Environmental Regulatory Institute from Serbia. I must once again bring the elephant back to room, and the elephant is called Rio Tinto. And Katarina mentioned before, but if somebody thinks it's strictly environmental issue, it's not. Believe me, it's equally rule of law issue. And I would like to say something about the responsibility and the role of the EU in this process. We had last year, while the project was suspended officially by the Constitutional Court of Serbia, we had this memorandum of understanding signed between the government of Serbia on one side and Mr. Šefčovič on behalf of the EU from the other side, while the project, I repeat, was officially suspended. We have these protests and arrests of tens and tens of people in Serbia this year, and constant campaign and special TV show on the regime televisions against the NGOs who are opposing to this project. And these are all, just to mention because it's important, these are all pro-EU NGOs, including mine, in which I am a member. So these are not some right-wing pro-Russian organizations, and the support from the EU and member states was, I wouldn't say completely missing, but was not at the satisfactory level. And I will conclude with this. We have now a public debate on the criminal law, amendments of the criminal law in Serbia, which will facilitate and enable government to even easier arrest and prosecute the people, especially in relation with the protests and especially considering this situation. It is my belief that this is the reason why these amendments are suggested. So my question goes to Professor Priebe, and I would like to ask him if he shares this opinion that the EU is sometimes ready to neglect some of these basic principles that we are mentioning today, rule of law, democracy, human rights, for higher interests, in this particular case, lithium, and how dangerous is that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else who would like to come to the stage, or? Yeah, please.
Hello. First,
Welcome.
thanks for your insightful discussion. I'm Daniela Liberatore from the Aspen Institute Germany. And my question stems from the consideration that when we talk about EU accession process, it always comes the issue of credibility, and most of the time the lack of credibility of EU institutions in the Western Balkans. And I think this mirror or gives an insight of a broader challenge that EU is currently facing, and is the actual ability and leverage to ensure that countries, once they join, or also already member state, do actually respect the rule of law. And so my question is, if you think that the European Union is actually working on its credibility and mostly in enforcing and fighting specifically anti-corruption. And for example, I think about the short-lived EU anti-corruption report in 2013, and if it's taking measures, if these measures are actually adequate to tackle these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we have a lot of questions and lots of reflections. So I'll hand it over to the panel to offer your reflection on some of these points. Professor, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I'm in the happy situation that I have no obligation anymore to defend the European Union.
That's why we started with you.
When I was in charge of the Western Balkans and the European Commission, I only got criticism that we were too strict. And it's interesting to hear so many criticism now that the EU is not strict enough. And that is a good sign, because it shows that the civil society, the NGOs, are engaging in this area. And I have the impression that engaging, especially in the area of rule of law, might be more difficult for civil society. I remember, just to give you an example, when we prepared one of the two Macedonia reports, we had many sessions with civil society representatives, amongst them one practicing lawyer who gave us very interesting information, but at the end of the meeting he said, "Can I be sure that you don't mention my name? I earn my money in pleading cases in courts in Macedonia, and if they read what I have said about the functioning of the judiciary in Macedonia, I will lose all the cases in the future." So therefore, engaging for civil society is maybe particularly difficult in this area. Does the EU, in particular situation, neglect or is less rigid on rule of law issues because there are even more important issues to deal with? You don't seriously expect me to answer to that question. Maybe I will lose my pension rights. I think I try to give a hint to that. And if you force me to be more concrete, well, having so much problems to make Bosnia and Herzegovina a functioning state under a impossibly complicated Dayton constitution, or having this big issue of Kosovo and Serbia not yet solved, there might be politicians in Brussels who think we should focus on this very much and don't make their lives even more difficult in coming with this and that other conditionality question. There might be. I'm not saying that this happens. And maybe it was discussed this morning with a new change in personnel in the Commission on dealing with the Western Balkans. There might be also changes in approaches on this matter. One of your questions in the beginning was what should the Berlin process do there? Well, I don't want to shock anybody. I would be a bit skeptical to put this as another big pillar of Berlin process. What I found very interesting over the whole day in the discussions is that rule of law is a cross-cutting issue entering in all other issues. I would never have thought that the flooding in Bosnia would have anything to do with the rule of law, frankly speaking. So having the rule of law aspects and all the other priorities, especially in the economic priorities, might be a better approach than to build a new rule of law pillar in the Berlin process. My personal opinion.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's for me, it's very encouraging actually to see that people are so passionate about this very sensitive topic in the region, and to realize, and it's that. As the professor said, it's a cross-cutting issue. So sometimes I think the problem is that people do not realize how much impact corruption has in their lives. I deliberately pointed out the disaster in Bosnia and Herzegovina from last week because most of the people did not realize that it can be related. I would just want to remind everybody, going back to what the professor said in his first intervention, that rule of law problem and the problem of corruption is, I think it's wrong if we consider it only with regards to EU integration. No, I think we have to address this problem as our problem and find our solutions. And that's why, I mean, our organization, we are very much willing to support the government and the civil society, academia. We try to engage with academia as well, to use the regional expertise because there is a regional expertise, and I agree with the professor that we can and we have to use it more to find solutions that work for our region, and to do it for ourselves, not for. And then we'll join EU without even discussing it, I would say. So this is something that we have to realize. And also, I know it's very attractive to speak about track records, investigations, high-level corruption. Blood is always attractive. But I think it's also very important to continue and work every day for corruption prevention because laws in the end of the day, are implemented by human beings. And then we have to have people with integrity enough to implement the laws in place. Otherwise, we'll continue with discussions, I think, for the next probably 25 years, even not, if not more.
Thank you.
If I do a questionnaire right now from whether the EULEX in Kosovo since 2008 has been a successful story, I firmly do believe that most of you, well, in a scale from 1 to 10, would give probably a grade 2 or 3 or 4 maximum. No one is satisfied. Professor Priebe could talk probably more on this issue, but European Union towards Kosovo played a doctrine or implemented the doctrine of stabulocracy instead of the rule of law, strengthening democracy, and the rest what comes from the rule of law. This hysteria in Kosovo, which costs to you, European Union citizens, more than it costed actually, or it goes ahead still nowadays, more than 500 million euro per year. It's the biggest dilemma that European Union should be proud of EULEX or should not be proud of EULEX. So because of 5 non-recognizers among 27, everyone is willing to say this is a political matter and it's not a judicial matter. But when we see currently in Kosovo whether the judicial institutions are impartial or are independent, we strongly say that they are fully independent and fully. No, because the legal package in the country is very Europeanized. The will is different. It's the same, I believe, in Serbia, in Montenegro, in Albania. Here what was mentioned, SPAC, that those so-called big fishes were arrested. The entourage of Prime Minister Rama and various people who were serving him, but now today are in a prison. So European Union has to be more sincere towards the Balkans. This is a fundamental, this is instrumental. What the sincerity means, that you have to give the credits to the domestic institutions that they could be, but actually they should be independent, but strengthening the rule of law should be more investment in a cultural level than an illegal package. So now, as a government, we have a very strong cooperation with the EU office in Pristina. And when they, for instance, when we are almost done, this is off the record, when we are almost done in creating some new legislative agenda.
We are live on YouTube.
They, sorry.
We are live on YouTube.
No, I'm kidding. That's why on purpose I'm saying off the record. On purpose. When we say they come to us and they say, please send this to Venice Commission. They want to make, again, troubles, not solving the issues. It's not using this meta institutions worldwide then can stop the reform. They have to be more cooperative, and they have to leave alone, because we are aware of the conditions of Copenhagen criteria, and everyone is aware of that. But EU has to be more sincere towards the EU states. Okay, I cannot play a good politician here to say that the entire 6 Balkan states are frustrated from the EU integrations, because the light in the end of the tunnel is far away, beyond 2030. Beyond 2030. So I don't believe that it will be soon the full integration. So this is the sort. And the one last point with regard to the civil society and the Berlin process. We particularly as the Ministry of Justice, we have very strong cooperation with civil society organizations. Some of the respected directors and representatives of NGOs in Pristina are here, and they know that we don't do any particular law without their expertise or without having them. So we cooperate very much closely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Or you wanted to comment on? Actually, I have a microphone.
Yes.
So sorry for. I just forgot this. So there are several topics that, from your initial questions, that I didn't comment, like regional cooperation and role of civil society. Of course, I absolutely agree to introduce a Berlin process discussion. importance of fight against corruption. But when we speak about regional cooperation, yes, we can obviously learn on each country's experiences. When I say we, no, first we as a civil society organizations, and we can learn not just from our neighbors in Balkans about bad practices, but also from already member states about some ideas how to suppress civil society and how to develop corruption in countries which are already part of EU. But yes, we are learning and we are trying to counter somehow oppressive methods that are implemented in one country, to use strategies that our colleagues used, but also I'm also pretty much convinced that politicians or leaders of countries are also exchanging experiences among themselves and learn how to minimize the role of civil society through various methods, either legal or different. So basically speaking, we as civil society need to have some conditions to fulfill our mission. So for example, we need to have really effective and implemented access to information rules, and not to have a situation that many of my colleagues experience, that we are seeking for basic information from public bodies. Like Jovan mentioned this lithium project, and our organization asked Ministry of Finance for analysis, because our government is saying this is highly profitable project, it will increase GDP for 10 billion, 12 billion euro, and we ask simple question to Ministry of Finance, okay, please provide us analysis that you base your estimation on, and obviously there was no answer. So without this tool, and this is again respect of the rule of law, because we have that written in the law that the ministry has to respond within 15 days, we cannot perform effectively our monitoring role. And without respect of rules on public consultation, we cannot obviously perform our advocacy role. And the issue of European integration, look, I believe we all agree that it has huge positive potential, but it also has its limits, and we are all aware of that. Even not just about priorities, other priorities that are considered higher, but also because of numerous occasions where we received a response from like EU bodies, oh, but we cannot ask that your government because we don't have a key. Okay, maybe you don't have a key, but we have serious problem with the rule of law in that regards. We have problem in fight corruption in that area. So some sort of changed approach is necessary, and yes, and I will stop now. I wanted to make some comparisons of European integration of Balkans with American integration in 19th century, and you know how they called what we call now candidate countries. They call them territories.
And they
So,
didn't have Copenhagen criteria.
no, definitely not. But I'm just scared that that might be one of scenario if Euro enthusiasm is on in downwards tendency. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, we are entering in the final 5 minutes, and what I had in mind is if I could give each of you about a minute to offer sort of your last reflections about the Berlin process, and in particular what the leaders should hear on Monday when it comes to fighting corruption and the rule of law, but in particular creating the conditions for the civil society to put spotlight, because partially as what we discovered today, but what we know from different studies and so on, that civil society does engage in these sort of issues. However, they are fought back, or their conditions or their practices are reduced. So in your sort of final remarks, how can they address, or what sort of issues because personally I don't hope and I don't wish the Berlin process to be another 10 years. So I hope the Western Balkan countries could join before. But, you know, in hindsight, you never know. Shall we start with the Deputy Minister?
Thank you, Professor. I believe on Monday the Leaders' Summit would be in the sense that particularly on the fight against corruption. The Berlin Summit cannot be a parallel institutions because we have who qualified as a regress report, each and you, I believe. Right?
Yeah.
So progress report each September is telling us that the judiciary is weak and corrupted. In the last 15 years, the same wording for each of remaining 6 Western Balkan countries. So the same wording, the same philosophy, the same attitude, and European Commission now and Berlin Summit, especially the big leaders of the EU members, because now with Mr. Orban and with the rest of autocrats, I believe no one is taking care of or especially with Ukraine and Israel and so on and so forth, they will be less engaged in the Balkans. Now the civil society's voice is going to be instrumental, and this is a very fortunate thing that you have here in Berlin very frequently them. And you should have them more than the governments, I believe.
Thank you.
Well, call me optimistic, but what I would suggest is reintroduce rule of law and fight against corruption, probably as a cross-cutting issue, as the professor suggested. Don't put it under the carpet. Have the spotlight on these issues, and try to use the existing regional, national, local expertise. Try to find solutions. I mean, I think we have many discussions. It's time for finding solutions which work in our region, and make use of our organization as well.
Thank you.
Reminds me a bit your question of in my active time, the Commission asking, Reinhard, could you produce 2 sentences for the conclusions next Monday? The conclusions could be, the sentences could be, there remains a widespread dissatisfaction within the countries on the non-functioning of the rule of law, and the countries will have to engage at all levels, at governmental level, at civil society level, and with each citizen to improve that situation, because this is essential for the functioning of a democratic state and for a forward-looking economic development. Is that fine?
That's very well. Thank you.
Well, I already said several things that may be used for these conclusions, and we can look back for such conditions. But I mean, we can start with basics. If it comes to civil society, obviously, message should incorporate call for the governments in the region not to oppress civil society organizations, at least, and not to do this not only directly but also indirectly, because there are various ways to do this. And then also to provide us with these basic preconditions for performing our monitoring and advocacy work, which are part of the rule of law, because all our countries already have legislation in place that should enable that. That might be one part of the message, and when it comes to